listening to the See the Unseen podcast, where our number one focus is creating a little visibility for people who deserve a whole lot of spotlight. I'm your host, Melissa Dorjob, and I'm here to share some amazing stories that can transform and inspire lives. So get ready to take those blinders off and see the unseen. Welcome to the podcast. Today I have Jason Koger here in the studio. I'm so excited. He is the author of Handed a Greater Purpose, and he's autographed this book for me. And he is the first bilateral upper amputee in the entire world that has been fitted with two multi-articulating bionic arms. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
So he's a father, husband, he's a TV personality. He's been on Hawaii Five-0, and he's done a TEDx talk on stage, and he's going to talk about his accident, and he's also going to talk about his faith. So welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, this is so exciting. Yeah, so let me just explain a little bit to the listeners how we met. I believe I saw you, I don't know if it was Facebook or LinkedIn, but I saw you and your story, and I was just like, I think I just reached out to you in an email or like a message, and I said, hey, could you do a Zoom call with me because I want to hear more about your story? Is that what I did?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Okay, because I remember that you got on and you told your story, and I'm having this Zoom call, and you're telling me all about the accident and everything, and I couldn't even believe it. I got off the call, and I was like, I went to my husband and I said, you know what? I have to get this guy on. I have to like start a podcast or something. I said, because I heard your story, and then I heard this woman who like literally had hid her little hand for 25 years. And so it was yours first and then hers. And I was just like, I think more people need to hear these really inspiring stories. And I just remember talking about, I was telling them everything about it. And it got me super excited. And so that's when I just started talking about it. And I was on a podcast, and then long story short, I just decided, let's do this thing. And then it's been a while. I mean, it's been since like last June, and I know we've been talking, and it's like, I want to get you on this podcast because you're really the person who inspired me to do it.
Yeah. And, I wanted to do it too. And I just thought it'd be easier if we actually come into the studio instead of doing a Zoom call. I think it would be a lot neater. So, I'm heading to Chicago this afternoon, and I figured, man, this is not very far out of the way. So we're going to head towards St. Louis, do the podcast, and then go to Illinois or go to Chicago.
That's right. So where are you from?
I'm from Owensboro, Kentucky.
Right. And I knew that when I heard the accent. I was like, Jason is a good old country boy.
That's right. I tell everybody I'm from New York.
You do. So tell me a little bit about how did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about your family and you personally.
Yeah. So I was raised up right outside of Owensboro. It's called Utica, Kentucky. We was raised up on a farm my grandfather had, and it was my house where my mom and dad built a house. And then next door was my uncle, which I had a cousin that lived there that's my age. And then next door to him is my grandfather's house. And then next door to him is my other uncle. And I got a cousin that's a 1 year older than us. So we kind of grew up out on this farm, just running around, riding four-wheelers, just the same old. And my mom and dad had a construction company, so I worked with them ever since I was old enough to be able to sweep the floors. And so I didn't really work on a farm. People ask me that all the time. Me and my dad had a farm. We had some cattle on that we just played with. That was a lot of fun, but I worked at the construction field. And then after graduating high school, decided to go to college. So I went to Murray State University and graduated with an ag engineering degree. And I just took some extra classes that I thought would help me in the construction field in my dad's business. And then came back home to Owensboro. And actually in Murray, I met my wife now. Her name's Jenny. Jenny was actually from Owensboro, but she went to a different high school than I did. We had a lot of the same friends, but never knew each other until college. So I came home and I went to work for my dad, ran a lot of work. And Jenny and I started dating, and I knew that was somebody that I wanted to marry. So I asked her to marry me. And even before that, like, I knew that Jenny was somebody I wanted to spend my life with. And her.
I'm going to stop you for a
Okay.
second.
All right.
Number one, I'm going to come back to that. But number one, I know that Andy, he's my fiance. We're getting married in like a week and a half or something.
Awesome.
But he is going to be so jealous the fact that you guys built this like compound, right? It's like all the family is all around. He wants to do that with like all of our kids and grandbabies so that they don't get away from us.
That's right.
Which is really cool. But how did you know that your wife was the one? Because it wasn't very long, right? After you dated?
No, we dated actually for a while. We were actually really good friends for a little while. I was dating somebody, she was dating somebody, and we just got along. And Dad jokes with it all the time because I wasn't a big sports guy, and she was a dancer on the dance team at Murray State. So I told Dad, I guess it was some, I don't know, weekend that the parents came in or whatever, and I told Dad, I said, "You want to go to a football game?" And he's like, "He don't even like football that much. Why does he want to go to a football game?" And it really turned out that I wanted him or them to see Jenny, meet Jenny. And Jenny would always ride home with me sometimes from college, and we just got to know each other really well. So we actually dated for quite a while before we got married, or I asked her.
And then how did you propose?
So I knew I wanted to marry her, and I wanted to ask her dad. I always think that's really important to ask for permission. And I just wasn't for sure exactly when I wanted to do it. And long and short, Jenny had, I went to pick Jenny up one day just to go out to town, and got there, and her dad, his name was Billy. And Billy was mowing the grass, and, he got off the lawnmower, told Jenny, he loved her, whatever, goodbye. And we just barely made it to Owensboro, and we got a phone call, and he had a massive heart attack and passed away. Jenny's dad did. So I did not get to ask him, but whenever I decided that it was time, I actually, at the funeral, I wrote a letter and basically asked for his permission. And I asked Jenny if I could put the letter in his casket. So that's what I did. And she had no clue what it was. And then I don't know how long it was after that. I mean, it was probably a few months because she was going through all that. And so then whenever I asked her, I basically showed her the letter and showed her that I did ask her dad, even though that.
Oh, that's so sweet.
That's how I did it.
Oh my gosh. That is like the sweetest story. Oh my gosh. So of course she said yes.
Yes, she did.
Oh, I'm sure she was in tears. But how sweet of you to do that, and how old fashioned and thoughtful and respectful. That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so we know Jenny is crazy in love with you, evidently, because you're probably the sweetest guy. And then, so tell me a little bit about your kids.
So we bought a house in Owensboro that was, I don't know, just a little 900 square foot home, just a starter home. And in my mind, ever since I was a little boy, I always wanted to live back out in the country where I was raised up. That's what I wanted to do, was buy my mom and dad's house, and my cousins wanted to basically do the same and kind of raise my kids the same way. So we moved into this little house in Owensboro, and when we got ready to start having kids, and I told Jenny, we talked about it a lot. She said the first child we have, regardless if it's a boy or girl, I'd like to name the baby Billy. So I said, no, it's fine. So we had our first daughter, and her name is Billy Grace.
Cute.
Billy Grace Koger. And it was funny. So Billy was born on June the 5th of 2006. And I knew the doctor real well. And I told him I was afraid that Billy was going to be born on 6/6 of 06.
Oh, no.
So I called the doctor, and we got induced on the 5th. So she was born on 6/5/06. So she was our first. And then we were going to wait a little while before we had, another one and kind of talk about it. But in the same token, Jenny was like, we cannot raise another kid in this house, because it was a 3-bedroom, but we didn't have any closet space. So it was really a 2-bedroom and one big old closet, or a bedroom was a closet. So, whenever we were going to think about having another baby, that was going to be the time to find something bigger, whatever. and came home one night, and Jenny surprised me, or I surprised her, or whatever, and we were pregnant again. So at that moment, I had to do something, and so I went to my mom and dad's house, and I kicked them out.
Kicked your mom and dad out of their house?
Pretty much.
And said, we're living here?
Yeah.
And they didn't get to stay?
No.
They went back to your house?
No, they moved to another place.
Okay.
They always knew I was coming, so.
Gotcha. Well, I have a picture here of your family. I'm going to throw it up here. That's your son there on the left, and your beautiful wife in the middle. And then I need my glasses on. Is that your daughter?
Yep.
Then to the right, and $2.
Yep. So
okay.
The far one to the right with the blonde hair, that's Billy Grace.
Okay. She's the first.
Yep. And then the second daughter, her name's Campbell. So she was born in December of 2007. And then Axel was born after that. He was born in July after my accident. So, and whenever I'm telling my story, I don't get to talk about Axel a lot because it was just us four. And I know we'll get into the accident in a minute, but the day of my accident, my oldest daughter was 21 months old, and my youngest at the time was 3 months old. So
wow. Well, let's just go there because it's kind of the elephant in the room, and you're here with your 2 bionic arms that are super cool. Maybe show the camera up in the listeners these pictures. It's really cool that he's got all the pictures of his kids and his wife on his arms. It just made this super cool sound. You should put that up there by the microphone. How cool is that? Okay, so let's go there, Jason. So Tell me what happened. So let's go to the day. What was the day like, and what happened?
So March 1st, 2008, it was a Saturday morning, and it was probably, I don't know, one of the first days that it was warm outside, just like a spring type day. And I had a long sleeve shirt on, like a flannel type shirt. So it was still a little cool, but not cold, wear a jacket or whatever. And I woke up that morning, and I was going to take the girls to the mall. There was a little train ride inside the mall for whatever reason. I don't know. They had it for a couple of months. It was probably, during Christmas or whatever. And so I decided I was going to take the girls into the mall to do this little train ride. And so we did that, came home, and I was starting to do a little bit of honeydew projects, I guess, just things around the house. Because before this day, I was working like a lot of hours. We were working some days 7 days a week. And so I didn't have a whole lot of time to get some of that kind of stuff done. So we were living in where I was raised up. And, I told you that there was a farm behind my house. So my grandfather, he farmed about 2,300 acres of corn and soybeans. So my backyard is a big field. It's pretty much what it is. And I've been there my whole entire life. And so after working on a few things, decided to go on a quick 4-wheeler ride around my grandfather's farm. My grandfather actually passed away, and there's a reason I'm telling this story, but my grandfather passed away about 3 months before I got hurt. And my cousin had moved into my grandfather's house. That's where he was living. So this little gravel dirt road it leaves my house, that kind of goes behind my house, and it's a U shape, and it ends up at my grandfather's grain bins. So I decided to go on a quick 4-wheeler ride around this farm. And, I've been around this farm my whole life anyway. And it's almost like I tell people, when you're in your house and it's nighttime and you got the lights out and you need to go to the bathroom, you can get up and walk to the bathroom without tripping over anything, without turning the lights on, because you know your house so well, And I felt like the same way with the farm. And so anyway, I left my house and went down, and there's a sharp corner to the left. I went around that corner, and then the next corner to the left, which would go back towards my grandfather's house, there's a culvert right there. So there's only one place you can really go across, is in that one little spot. And I was looking across the field, I was going slow. And by the time I turned around, I seen something. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it hit the front rack of my 4-wheeler, and it bounced, and then it hit me in the chest and landed on my gas tank. And I realized that it was a down power line. And so at this moment, it was between my body and my handlebars. So I thought about it for a second, and I've always been told that if you're on rubber tires, you're okay too. So I decided to pick it up enough to back off of it, and I did that. And I seen my cousin outside, so I got his attention. He came to where it was, and he was behind me. And at the time, I was I wasn't even worried about electricity at the time, because the power line went to a field pump, which pulls water out of a field. Well, in March, we don't have anything planted anyway, so I thought maybe it was off. But my biggest concern was the power line was 30 inches off the ground. And what if there's another kid in the neighborhood that's riding and he's running wide open? And my whole thought process was somebody getting decapitated. That's what was really going through my mind. And so my cousin was behind me, and I was explaining to him that I'd already hit it. And I just happened to turn around, and I was telling him I wish that the line was just this high. And I kind of threw my arm up just to show him how high. And at that moment, the next thing I remember is just feeling a vibration go through my body. I was electrocuted. I took 7,200 volts of electricity. And a lot of people, they really don't know what 7,200 is, but it was enough that it shut my neighborhood down. And when you get electrocuted, you take electricity for 30 seconds, and then it shuts off. And then it stays off for 30 seconds, and then it comes back on. And it goes on and off every 30 seconds until that person or that thing is off the line. Well, luckily, I was on it for 30 seconds. I found out later on that my heart had stopped, which was a good thing. And the way it was explained to me is, if your heart stops, your body knows it needs to fire up. If it goes into like a flutter, then it doesn't know that it needs to start up, right? So mine stopped, and it was either enough electricity that whenever it shot me off the line, that it basically started my heart back up, same thing as paddles would do, or I hit the ground hard enough that started my heart back up. But I was actually knocked out for those 30 seconds. And I remember everything being dark, like my eyes closed. And then when I hit the ground, I immediately woke up. I felt like my body was on fire, and I knew that I got electrocuted, and I was trying to climb down into a ditch to cool off pretty much. And my cousin was, pulling me out of the ditch, and he had already called 911 and his dad. So my uncle was still out there, and my uncle actually was one of the first ones I remember being there and just trying to calm me down, whatever. And I remember the ambulance and the fire trucks and all that coming down the hill to where I was. And I remember my wife getting back there at whatever point, but my cousin would not call my wife. I think he was afraid that, I don't know, maybe he thought I was going to die. I don't know. And he didn't want to call her. So he actually called my mom, which mom was in town. And, when he called her, he said that, I'd been in an accident and I was going to the hospital. And at that moment, I think, mom told Charlie, my cousin, was like, is he still alive? And Charlie wouldn't answer it. So anyway, my mom called my wife. My wife came back to where I was. And I remember getting the ambulance and going towards Owensboro Hospital. And
now, are you in pain during this time? Or,
oh, yeah.
Like, are you yelling? Are you screaming? Are you crying? Are you, are you in shock? Or
probably in shock?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't crying. I was just like really, a lot of stuff was going through my mind. And that's, I told you my grandfather passed away 3 months before. And the reason I said that is, so when I was on my way to Owensboro Hospital, I told my wife, I kept on reassuring her that everything's going to be okay. And I remember looking at my left thumb, and my left thumb was just barely hanging on. That's where electricity came out. And I remember telling my wife that they were going to amputate my thumb. Like, I knew that my thumb was not going to make it, right? They were going to have to amputate my thumb. And I told her over and over, I was like, my grandfather was a single arm amputee. And he lost his arm when he was 29 in a corn picker. And I kept on saying, Papa lost his entire arm, and I'm just going to lose my thumb. So, like, I kept on reassuring, whether I was trying to do that for myself or her or whatever, I was just, everything's going to be okay because I'm just going to lose my thumb. Papa lost his whole arm. And And I think about that every now and then now, because the bionics weren't out when my grandfather passed away. So he would be shocked at what the technology is like now. And but I never had that opportunity for 29 years, because I was 29 when I got hurt. I never had that opportunity, or never even thought about asking him questions about his prosthetic, because I don't know. I guess I was raised up by it and seen it, and it really wasn't that important to me, because I'm not going to be an amputee. You know what I mean?
When it's like, when it doesn't affect you. I mean, so many people, they don't really pay attention to it because it's like, oh, that'll never happen to me.
Yep.
And then when it happens to you, it's like, oh, holy crap, you know, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, so you're on your way to the hospital. You're reassuring your wife because you don't want her to be upset, and you're not worried that you could potentially lose both arms.
Yep. Had no clue.
So what happens then?
So I go into Owensboro Hospital, and the doctors and surgeons are running in and out trying to determine what to do, I guess. And they were in a panic. And then a doctor walked in and basically said, we got to get you out of here. You're either going to go to Vanderbilt Hospital to the burn unit, or we're going to send you to Louisville, Kentucky to the burn unit. But one of those places. And I remember even saying, like, let's go to Nashville, because, you know, we have doctors. My dad has a doctor in Nashville. My mom goes to Nashville a lot. So it's like, let's just go to Nashville. And he was like, doesn't matter where you want to go. It's whoever calls us back first. And they said they had a life flight on its way, helicopter. So I remember the helicopter landing. I remember getting into the helicopter. I remember my feet touching the front windshield, because the helicopter is pretty tight. I was on a stretcher, and I remember my left shoulder laying against the door where you could see out. I had a nurse behind me, and I was basically laying in her lap. And then I had a nurse to the right of me. So I remember all that. I remember getting in the air and flying. And Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee was the first one that called back.
Great hospital.
Yes, great hospital. I remember the flight. I remember getting cathed. I remember getting the port put in, I guess, is where they was going to put the medicine at whatever point. And, you know, the nurses just kept on over and over. It's just like, everything's going to be okay. And I was still confused of why we were going to Nashville, because I was like, I don't understand why we're even going to Nashville. It's just my thumb. You know what I mean? Like, that was literally the only thing that went through my mind. And got to Vanderbilt, and I remember getting off, going down an elevator. I remember going into a room that looked like a morgue, and really didn't know what that room was. And after I went through the procedures I went through, then they put me in an induced coma. But that room was called hydro room, and hydro is where they take a pressure washer and wash your dead skin off of you. So my whole right arm was 3rd-degree burns.
I do have some pictures here. So I knew this whole story, but like just the other day you posted on LinkedIn, and here's some pictures of your clothes. Okay. Here's the picture. Was that your shirt that you had on? That was my shirt.
Yep.
Okay. And then these are your pants.
Yep.
Here are some of your shoes.
Yep. Now on that shoe, if you look at my sock, you see the burn hole.
Mm-hmm.
So that hole right there, and I don't know if you can almost see it right below the lace.
Yeah.
On the shoe, that's where electricity came out of my foot. So it blew my tennis shoe. They found my tennis shoe 30 feet from where I was.
Oh my gosh. 30 feet. Here's some pictures. So these burn pictures were crazy. Like, I just saw these on LinkedIn this week, and I was just blown away. Here's a couple of pictures. This is your arm.
Yep. Now the 2 bottom pictures is the skin they took off my leg. That's both legs. They had to take skin off both legs in order just to cover my right arm.
And at this time, you are thinking it's your thumb.
Yep.
Okay, so keep going here. I want to hear more.
Yep.
So the doctors come in, and do they tell you at that time that it's more than your thumb, or what happens next?
Nope. So they put me into an induced coma. So I was in an induced coma for 3 days. And then he waited on my family to get to the hospital. And I was prepped and ready to go to surgery. And he basically had to ask my wife for permission to amputate whatever they had to amputate in order to save my life, and to do a blood transfusion, which they did not have to do. And so what it does is when you get electrocuted, it burns you from the inside out, and it causes poisonous toxins inside your body. So my urine looked like Dr. Pepper, which is basically your kidneys were shutting down. So they had to get in and get the infection out. So obviously Jenny signed the paperwork immediately and went to surgery, and they amputated that night. They amputated my right arm, and they cut open my left arm from my elbow down to my hand. And they said when they opened it up, it looked like a shotgun had went off on the inside of my hand. They said that all 10 of my tendons were wrapped up around my wrist, so my hands would have never worked, which is not why they amputated. But so they amputated both hands that night. And then for the first 3 days, actually, I found some paperwork the other day. I think I had like 26 surgeries the first 3 days, but I was in an induced coma the entire time. So I had no clue. I woke up with my arms gone, and I had no idea that was going to be an issue or a thought process or anything.
So you wake up, they've had 26 surgeries in a matter of 3 days, and you wake up, and what's your first thought?
So I was actually laying on a bed flat on my back because I had a small fracture in my neck and in my back as well. And come to find out, it was an old fracture. It wasn't from the electricity, but they thought it was. And I didn't know that I'd ever, I guess, broke or had a fracture in my neck and back either. But at some point I did. So I was laying on a flat bed, and my mom and dad came in to the room. I think my wife was still. So there was a person from Owensboro that owned a hotel, and he gave them a room for this entire time so that they didn't have to sleep in the hospital or whatever. And I think Jenny was at the hotel room, maybe with the girls. I don't know. And so when I woke up, my mom and dad came in the room and basically sat down with me and told me they had to amputate, both my arms in order to save my life. And but I remember them saying that we've always gone to church and that we didn't really know how, but we would get through it one way or another because we've always had faith. And it was like that, probably a reinsurance that it was going to be okay, but it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be, tomorrow we're going to be great. You know what I mean? It was more of we'll figure it out.
So your dad tells you that they had to amputate your arms. How do you feel now? Do you look down? Are you like in shock? How do you feel?
Well, I think I was in shock, but I think I was also just coming out of a coma. So I was probably really drowsy because I don't really even remember that room per se. I remember being in my regular hospital room more than anything. So I really don't know. I would assume that my whole thought process was about the kids, like how was it going to be different? You know what I mean? And, but then whenever I went to my hospital room, I remember meeting my doctor for the first time.
I've got a picture here of your doctor.
Yep.
Well, that's you. This is your doctor.
Yep.
What's his name?
Dr. Jeffrey Guy is his name.
Okay.
He's a great, great person. He told me from the day one, and actually this picture you have up right now is the first day that I was awake. So,
okay.
And what everybody notices about that picture is that I'm smiling.
Yeah. You look so happy. Like, that's crazy. You just have been burned by 7,200 volts of electricity. Both of your arms are blown away, and you're sitting up in this hospital bed with a smile on your face with your wife, and she's smiling with her hand wrapped around you.
Yep. I still got feeding tube and all in that picture.
So why were you smiling, Jason? I mean,
just happy to be alive. So,
wow.
But Dr. Jeffrey Guy, like when he came in the room, he basically told me that he was going to be my doctor the entire time. That if anybody, like I wasn't going to see him every day, but if I needed any questions or medical questions or anything, it was going to go through him. Right. And, he sat in the room with me several times and told me that he was actually doing something at church when he got the phone call that night. And, came to the hospital and started doing what he had to do. And But he came in the room and told me that I was going to have to be in the hospital for at least a couple months. And he told me, he said, I want to help you with a goal that you have in your life. Like, I want to know what you want to be able to do, and I want to try to help you succeed in one thing so that I can prove to you that, you're going to be able to reach a goal. And I remember him fixing to walk out of the room and me saying, I already know what I want. And he's like, how do you know what you want? You're a 29-year-old kid with missing two arms, and what could it be? How do you already know? And he sat down with me, and I remember telling him that my oldest daughter was 21 months old and my youngest was 3 months old, that if I could hold them again, that's all I cared about. And other stuff would happen. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to feed myself or dress myself or anything else, but I had to be able to hold my kids. That's really all I was worried about. And I remember him crying and just saying that I'll make sure that happens. And I guess I'll go into that story, but maybe a day or two later, Dr. Guy comes in my room and he says, your kids are here, and I'm going to bring them into the room so you can see them. And I told him, like, that can't happen. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I don't want them seeing me with feeding tubes and tubes hanging out of my arms and, hooked up to heart monitors and all this other stuff. Like, I want to go to the waiting room. And I talked him into pulling my feeding tubes and all my stuff, catheters and all that stuff out. And I went to the waiting room. I don't know if you got that picture, but I have a picture that floats around sometimes on Facebook of my mom and dad wheeling me in a wheelchair to the waiting room. And I have that exact same big smile on my face because I was going to see my kids for the first time. And I held my kids for the very first time that day.
I don't know. We have this beeping going on. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I don't know what that is either.
No.
Okay, so we heard a crazy beeping and I had to stop that. But so your mom and dad wheel you in. I don't have that picture, but I'll have to find it.
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Okay. So what happened?
So I went to the waiting room that day, and Billy Grace, being 21 months old, I think she was still a little scared. And I have a couple pictures I'll send you. But one of them, Billy would come from behind me, and she would like kiss me on the cheek, but she didn't want to be in front of me. And but anyway, I held Campbell for the first time, and I got a smile on my face, and I think it was because that was my goal and something that it had to happen. That it was probably everything else is going to be okay, because that's what I told myself from the very beginning. If I can do this, everything else will work out, and it was happening. So I just had that peace about everything was going to work one way or another. Now I knew it was going to be hard. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be overnight, and I try to tell people all the time, because people see me today, which the pictures you found last week was the anniversary of my accident 16 years ago. So when people see me now, they think that I am a huge success story, but they don't understand that everything I tried, I failed hundreds of thousands of times before I ever succeeded in everything. I mean, putting clothes on, feeding myself, not spilling a drink on me, like, you name it, everything. I failed at everything.
So you didn't have these bionic arms in the beginning.
Mm-mm.
So what was it like? What were some of the first things that you did?
So so my whole right arm was skin graft, so I couldn't have prosthetics on it for a long time. So when Dr. Guy, after I held my kids, I told Dr. Guy, I said, hey, you said I was going to be in here for months, and I can't be here for months. So I remember asking him what I had to do to get out of the hospital. And he told me a bunch of stuff. And I think in the back of his mind, and maybe multiple times, he would say, dude, you're probably going to be here for a while. Like, don't try too hard. Don't overdo it. You're going to be here for a little while. So 12 days after my accident, I was released from the hospital. I went home. As long as my wife and my mom would be a nurse. So they were taught how to take care of my wounds. They had to wash each of my skin graft donor spots, wrap them up, and putting certain medicines on it. So, I mean, it was a lot of work. It was washing each leg with a different washcloth 3 times a day, and then drying it with a different one 3 times a day. So, 3 times a day, I was having, 3 washcloths, 3 towels, 3 times a day. So, I mean, you can imagine the amount of laundry just in itself. So, I went home, and it was, my wife, 21-month-old, 3-month-old, me, and I had to have a lot of attention. And, you look at that, like my girls, both of them had to have a lot of attention too. So, they'd have to feed my oldest, feed my youngest at the time, feed me. So it was like a lot of times Jenny's food was cold. There was a lot of times that she didn't want to take a bath because she was too tired to take a bath because she was giving baths to the 3 of us. And I just remember, the first day that I got home, Jenny went to town, and my mom was staying with me. And I told my mom, I said, "Where's the keys to my truck?" And she said, "They're on the counter." "Why?" And I said, "Can I have them?" And she was like, "Why do you want your keys?" And I said, "I just want them." And
you weren't going to tell her because you knew what she would probably say. Yeah.
So I told her, I said, "Just put them in my mouth." And I went outside, and I don't know how long it took, but it took a while. And I got inside my truck and, drove my truck for the very first time, 12 days after my accident.
Wow.
So.
Okay, so you're driving your truck, you get the keys,
Mm-hmm.
and then you what? Just take off driving?
I drove around my grandfather's farm. So same place.
How did you drive?
So I stuck my nubs in the steering wheel and just drove around the farm. I knew better than drive down the road or whatever. So I drove for the first time that day. And then just from that moment on, I've always been very strong-willed of learning whatever I want to learn. If I don't want to learn it, I'm not going to try it. But from that day on, I just, like, every single day I would go to the garage and try to use a screwdriver or a wrench or just whatever I could do. And, funny story, the first time we went to Owensboro to town as a family. So it was me, Jenny, and the 2 girls. And we were at Hobby Lobby. And I told my wife, I said, me and Billy will walk around. She's 21 months old. And Campbell's 3 months old. So you take Campbell in the shopping cart, get whatever you're shopping for, and we're just going to hang out. So I was carrying Billy at the time in my nubs. And we were probably 3 or 4 rows over from where Jenny was. And she got to kicking. So I set her down on the ground. And she got up and went walking away from me. And I yelled at her and I said, "Billy Grace, get back over here." And she turned around and she just had this like grin, and she went running towards me, but it was kind of like slow motion, like you'd see on a movie. Like everything was super sweet. And I had this girl fixing to jump in my arms, give me this big hug. And so when she got to me with her arms wide open, she grabbed me by my pants and pulled my pants down to my ankles. So I'm standing in the middle of Hobby Lobby with my pants down to my ankles. And I'm like, I got to find Jenny now, because I was trying to tell her to pull my pants up. She wouldn't do it. So I had to wobble 3 aisles over and find Jenny. And Jenny pulled my pants up and she was like, "Man, that was embarrassing." I said, "Yeah, it was embarrassing." But I said, "It could have been worse." And she said, "What do you mean? How could it be worse?" And I said, "At least my underwear stayed up." So.
That is true. That is true. Oh, that's a pretty funny story. And I saw there was a story about Hobby Lobby, because you asked me earlier, have I read your book? And I have not read it all. I only read the first chapter, and this is why I stopped, because for whatever reason, I just feel like sometimes when I'm doing a podcast, I want everything to be very authentic and real. And so I want it to be like I'm hearing the story for the first time, and I want my reactions and everything to be authentic. So sometimes whenever you've heard the story before, or you read through something, then it doesn't feel the same. So I purposefully stopped reading the book, and I wanted to wait until after we had this podcast.
Yeah.
But
awesome.
I went through a couple of the chapters and I saw something about Hobby Lobby was going to be funny, but that sure was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of things like that happen. And before I go there, I know you made a comment about you going into the truck, needing the keys and wanting to drive the truck, but you were really just really trying to prove to yourself, like, I can do this, right? It was like taking a baby step of like, if I can do this, what else can I do? Right.
Absolutely.
And I would imagine then from that day forward, you just started doing everything, like you said, looking at tools or trying to figure out how to do other things. And I'm sure that when you're out and about and people see that you have 2 robotic arms, what do they say? Are there people who ask you about it, or?
A lot of times they ask me. They'll ask me at some points because they think. So when I wear.
Let's hold on. I'm sorry. 1 second. So sorry about that. We're having a little technical difficulties here, with technology. And, we can make bionic arms, but evidently, my Wi-Fi or something is going on here.
That's right.
Okay, so you have this T-shirt that says, "Look, Ma, no hands."
Yep.
And I would imagine you get a lot of fun comments about that.
And then I got another shirt that says, "Don't shoot, I'm unarmed." So,
so you make fun of yourself.
Yeah, and I think I think when people are around me that don't know me, they see the humor side of it, and they know that it's okay to talk to me about it. That's what I like to do, is they understand that it's okay. Because, some amputees I meet, they don't want to talk about it. And they try to stay to themselves, and they get offended when somebody asks. But, it's really hard when you don't see very many people that have bionic hands. You don't see very many people that's lost 2 arms. It's just like somebody in a wheelchair. You see people every day that's in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? So it's kind of common, but you just don't see somebody missing limbs very often. So, people are curious, and I want them to ask questions. I'm not ashamed of what happened. I'm not ashamed that I'm an amputee. I'm not ashamed that I wear, in my opinion, cool hands.
Let's look at your hands again. Show the listeners your hands.
You can hear it move.
It's like RoboCop. Right?
I got something about RoboCop later too.
Oh yeah.
So, but another quick story, or 2 quick stories. I took a knee brace apart, and where it kind of moves or has a round piece where it goes from the top of your leg to the bottom of your leg. So I put that on my nub early on, and I put a fork and duct taped it on the end of it. And that's how I fed myself from the very beginning. And then, so I got hurt March 1st, but the beginning of April, my buddy called me. So a little over a month after my accident, a buddy called me and he said, "Hey, I want you to go turkey hunting with me," because I love to hunt. And I was like, I don't know if I can go turkey hunting. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I can go and sit next to him and watch him kill a turkey, which I'm fine with that. And I said, well, but I need to call Dr. Guy. So Dr. Guy and I became really good friends. So I called him on his cell phone, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, can I go turkey hunting?" And he was just sat silent. And I said, "Can I go turkey hunting?" He was like, "Man, I don't know." He said, "You ask me questions like this all the time, and I've never met anybody that just does what you do." And he said, "Why do you think you cannot go?" And I said, "Well, I'm still bleeding, still got open wounds. I'm afraid a tick's going to get inside my wound, and you're going to have to cut more off, and I don't want that to happen." And I remember him laughing and just saying, "Just spray off real good." So called my buddy back, and this is just the kind of people I had around me. But I called him back, and I said, "Hey," he said, "I can go." And he said, "Well, come up tonight, spend the night with me." And then I was like, "Well, Sam, I can't use the bathroom on my own. Like, there's a lot of stuff I can't do." And he said, "That's fine. You're like a brother to me, so come on." And I went to Butler County where he lived and stayed the night with him at night. And Sam came in front of me and laid this shotgun in my lap. And he said, "You're going to hunt tomorrow." And I was like, "Dude, I don't have arms or nothing." So we took the 2 screws out of the butt of the shotgun and put a ratchet strap on it. And we strapped it to my shoulder. And we put a tripod on the front with a radiator hose clamp and a string from the trigger to my mouth. And that's how I killed my first turkey.
Crazy. You were out hunting, and how many days or months after you had the surgery?
A month, a little over a month.
Out hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So you go hunting for the first time, and how many days? What were you saying?
A little over a month.
A month. You're hunting.
Yep. Killed my first turkey like that.
Wow, you must really love hunting. Just like my soon-to-be husband, he loves to hunt, so I can understand. Evidently, it's a thing.
It is. I mean, it's more of a just being with a buddy in the woods and no cell phones, you're shut away from the whole world, and you can really just sit there and think and talk, and it's pretty peaceful, really. So
show me what you can do with those hands. I know I wanted you to sign that piece of paper.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could do that.
I can.
So people can see what it.
So basically, I hold the ink pen where I want it.
Okay.
And then once I got the ink pen, I can rotate it where I want it. So I mean, I'm just holding a certain muscle to make it move around. And it's funny, sometimes when I'm around a lot of electronics, so the hook's kind of not working exactly right because it's probably interfering with a bunch of the.
Maybe that's why we're getting that beeping.
It could be. It could be.
Who knows?
So basically, you wanted me to sign my name here, so.
Yeah.
And then I don't even know what today is.
Today is March 6th.
3/6 of
2024.
2024, man. There you go.
All right, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, I went hunting, and then and I told that story because I had a lot of people in my life that were willing to help me do whatever they had to do to get me back into the things I love to do. And that was everything, going to eat, being in Owensboro. My community was very supportive. They did a benefit for me to help us out. Every time I went to a restaurant and somebody would see me eating, they would come over and clap me or, smack me on the back or give me a hug or whatever and just say how proud they were. And, you looked at social media and people saying, you're an inspiration. You've done this, you've done that. And all that positive comments is huge for anybody. I mean, even if you're not going through something like I went through, it's always good and always nice to hear something positive, right? Not negative. So I had a lot of positivity around me, a lot.
Sure. So I can imagine that. Would you ever feel depressed? Did you ever go through depression?
No. Dr. Guy said I would, and I never did. And people ask me why. And I mean, I think it's several things. I think it's my faith. I think it's, I had 2 kids. So when I woke up in the morning and you hear little feet prints running down the hallway, it's like, how can you be depressed whenever, when you have that? I had friends, I had, a great community. I had great parents. I had great in-laws, I had great wife, everything that I had was, maybe above normal. I don't know. But I didn't have any reason to be negative or depressed or whatever. I just didn't have it. I didn't have time for that.
No time to be depressed.
That's right.
So you said, it was because of your faith.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about that. When you say it was your faith, I mean, at a time when you don't have arms, you are going through all these multiple surgeries. How do you stay, keeping your faith? And were you ever mad at God? Were you ever angry about it? What were you saying to God at the time?
No, I mean, I've always known that nobody's life is ever going to be perfect. And God did not promise us a perfect life. And I've always known that. So I think it's always been between that and also knowing that everything happens for a reason. And sometimes we don't know what that reason is. And I knew that there was something bigger or better for me. And, it is hard to try to figure that out. And you can't really figure it out right off the bat when you go through something like I went through. It's not like tomorrow everything's going to be great and grand. And I'm still learning stuff. It's been 16 years. I still don't know really exactly what my path is. I know sharing my story has been a big part of it. But I do a lot of public speaking too, and people's like, all right, you need to pick who you want to speak to. I said, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you want to speak to? Kindergartners, elementary school, middle school, high school, college? Or do you want to speak to a corporation? Do you want to speak to churches? Do you want to speak to, like, what is your audience? And in my mind, it's everybody in the world audience. You know what I mean? It's not, I don't pick which one it is. I think everybody needs to hear a story of success that knows one way or another, everything's going to be okay. And it's not just faith. You have to have the faith, but you also have to work hard. It's not just dependent on your faith. You got to put work into it too. You know what I mean? I mean, it takes both. It takes a good attitude. It takes believing. And like I said, I was raised up in church, so I didn't really know any different than to move forward. And I didn't say this earlier, but my dad was a drill sergeant in the Army. So, and the way he was raised up, there was always never could you ever say, I can't do something. That wasn't an option. So there's a lot of different things that really, I had a very good mindset. I watched something on TikTok this morning of a guy talking, and he was saying that he does not have any more room in his body, in his mind, in his life for anything to be negative. So like he wants to pull out all the negative and make more space for the positive, because his life is so full, he has no more room. And at that moment, when you don't have any more room, you either got to make room or you don't move forward. And him making room is getting rid of negative or getting rid of people that are not a positive role in his life, or whatever that is. I mean, it takes away all the negative stuff, and he just wants more of the good stuff. That's pretty powerful.
Well, it's funny that you say you're not for sure what your purpose is. It's like, I've been kind of struggling with this too, because I was in the wheelchair industry for 30 years. And then now I'm in the ventilator space, and I've done a little bit of speaking. And of course I started a podcast, so I'm speaking. Yep. But then, we're always kind of wondering, like, what's our purpose? But part of my podcast was not just, people with disabilities. It was also singer-songwriters, telling the stories behind the songs, and then helping young people in their career, and then talking about my faith. And it really resonated with me when you said, people want to know, like, well, who's your audience, right? And they're always asking me that too, right? Is it people with disabilities? Is it health plans? Is it, young people? But I think about that too. And I think it's everybody, because it's people who have gone through, I've gone through a lot of different things, nothing like what you have gone through, but other challenges. And we always, I want to share my story to help others. But this, really the story about our faith too is like, everybody needs to hear, the love of God, and like and the promise and the hope, because no matter what we're going through, if you have God in your life, it just makes all the difference in the world. And so, I think about that. It's almost like, oh, when you get that, when you get that title, when you make all the money, when I got the house that I want, and then, oh, when I get the guy of my dreams, then I'm going to be happy. When all these things happen, and then I got all these things, and I was like, and then I lost my job, and I was not really that happy at times. I was really like struggling with something. It wasn't until I put in God in my life. I've been, I was saved back in, I was like 11 years old. And so I've had church kind of like on and off my whole life, but until I recently, and I would say, like, soon as I said something on the podcast that I wanted to share my faith, it was almost like I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm gonna test your faith a little bit. Like, let's see, like, what you've got here. And because I was not even near ready to do that. And so the more and more, like, you learn about the Bible, and the more you learn about God and his love, I think the more you're going to share with everybody in the world, because you want to share, because it's this peace that you have, in your life, when you know that you're not alone.
Yep.
So when I think about your purpose, you're sitting here with 2 bionic arms, and you're the only, the first guy in the world to have 2 bionic arms. And just think of, like, how many people that you could help and inspire by telling your story. And I know you're doing that. So you've also been speaking. You've done a TEDx talk.
I have. Yep.
That's crazy because I know a lot of people are doing them. And so what was your talk kind of on? Was it like you're telling your story or
overcoming
adversity and overcoming barriers?
Yep.
Wow.
And it was interesting because when I got asked for it. I didn't really put in for it. I didn't even know what TEDx was.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. And the hardest part about a TEDx talk is you're limited to just a minute or two, or like it's super quick, and you got to get all this information out in a very quick way. And I'm more of my story could be 2 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's so many parts to my story. It's just like, when you bring up faith. So like I think about somebody that might not believe anything in the Bible. Let's just say they're not a Christian. They don't understand. They don't want to know whatever. And they hear a story of God walking over on the water and automatically, play devil's advocate and just say, prove to me that he did it. And then you can say, well, it's right here in the Bible. And then I could say, well, show me a picture of it. There's not a picture. So, or show me a video or show me this and that. And there's no proof that it happened. And I believe it because I'm a Christian, but maybe that's my time. Maybe that's when God needs stories like mine or any story. It doesn't have to be as big as mine. It could be bigger than mine. It could be a lot smaller than mine. But show somebody what he has done in my life, like right now, and you can see it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can see a picture of it. You can see a video of it. You can see it in person. And maybe that is what, and I believe that's what God wants us to do, is he wants us to share about him however we can share about him, whether it's what has happened in our life or, that's what I love when I hear people's stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of something that I've always struggled with because I'm very visual. And it's kind of like, well, if I can't see it, how am I supposed to believe it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way I could explain to my son when he's like, well, how do you know? And I said, well, it's just the things that happen in my life where I just like, there's nothing else I can explain, but just that was God. Like I couldn't have done that in my own being, things that happened in my career or things that I was able to do in my life. I just know that it's not because I come from a small town here in Bethalto. Like, how was I able to do these things? And so, or I've seen all the challenges that I've gone through, and then like, how did I overcome all those things? And it's only because of him. Yeah. So, I was just reading. Also, my brother texted me this morning about this too. Is that we're supposed? It's blessed who believe and don't see. Is what he says in the Bible too. Yep. That's so hard sometimes to be like, just to believe in something that you can't see. But like you said, going through something like this, if you didn't have God in your life, I think it would be a whole different story about how you might feel about things. Yeah. And
I think this is a perfect time to say, I was told that I would never be able to do this and never be able to do that. Like there were so many things that I was told would never happen. One of them being that I took enough electricity that I would never have any more kids. And Jenny wanted 4 kids, what she wanted. And I have a little boy now that was born after my accident. He's 12 now. His name's Axel. Wow. So those things that are never going to happen has definitely happened. I was told I would never get prosthetics. I would never get the bionic hands because they're too expensive. My insurance would say no. My insurance did deny me from getting prosthetics at first, and I fought for it. I told them reasons I wanted it. I wanted to be able to hold my kid's hand to walk across the street. I wanted to do the same things I did when I had hands, and I fought for it so much that my insurance said yes. And then once I got the bionic hands, I started getting a lot of newspaper articles and local news, which turned into CNN. So then I was on CNN, which I felt like I was the second person in the world to ever lose a hand because I'd never seen anybody but my grandfather. So I didn't have anybody to talk to me about upper limb prosthetics. And then I get on CNN And then I started getting people from all over the world, Mexico, all over the world, that Googled me and found me and reached out to me. So then I started talking to people about how prosthetics work from CNN. And then I get asked to do an episode on Hawaii 5-0. So I've never been on TV before except for news. And I did the Hookman episode, and they hired RoboCop from the 80s. And, you know, I was a kid in the 80s. So RoboCop was a huge thing whenever I was little. So I go to Hawaii 5-0 in Honolulu. I filmed this episode. The episode cost like $6 million to do. And CBS is calling every single day. And they're putting a lot of pressure on me because if I'm not producing, they're going to cancel the show. We filmed for 2.5 weeks. The show went great. Towards the end of the show, Peter Weller, RoboCop, was like, "Hey, give me your cell phone number." And I was like, "Okay." He gave me his cell phone number. So then I asked him, I'm like, "How do I call you? Like, call you when I want? Or like, you know, you're a celebrity. I don't know how you call celebrities." And so I kind of went home and, you know, Alex O'Loughlin, which is McGarrett on the show, same thing, got his number. So I get home and I'm like, I can't call these guys, man. They're too busy. They're way above me, you know? And then Peter Weller calls me one day and I'm in Owensboro, Kentucky. And he calls me and he says, "Hey, the hands you have is made by Touch Bionics at the time. It's made by Oser now." And he said, "Did you know they had a new set, a new one coming out?" I said, "Yeah, but my insurance won't let me have it." And he goes, "Well, I called Touch Bionics and I told them that if they wanted their name on Hawaii 5-0, they are to send you new hands." So I became the first person in the world, second time, with bionic hands. And then that opened up doors for me to work with Touch Bionics, which is now Oser. So that happened.
Which, by the way, my sister works for an Oser company. It's called Premier Prosthetics and Orthotics. So shout out to my sister, Christy Crocker.
Awesome.
Yeah, and she actually wanted to meet you today, and she called in and told them that she wasn't coming in because she's like, my sister's doing a podcast, and I told her this morning. I didn't give her a lot of time, and she's like, "I'm going to come in half a day," and they're like, "Oh no, we need you here." So unfortunately, she couldn't come and she's super bummed out because she wanted to meet you.
That's funny.
So yeah, but I know insurance is of a big challenge. I've worked with something called a Jaco robotic arm, and it's for people who it attaches to your complex wheelchair, and it will help you feed people, and they can pick up a bottle to drink. And people, and some of these, you know, well, I called a Medicaid program the other day, and they made this comment that, "Well, who prepares the soup?" And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, I have to really figure out the answer to that. But, you know, they don't want to pay for things that seem like convenience. And like when you were sitting there telling me about holding your daughter or your son for the first time, I mean, to me, it's like, how can you deny someone the ability to hold their child or to eat or clothe themselves or whatever you're doing?
Yep.
And deny you the ability to have these arms? I don't care how much they cost. Like, it's not like you're the only one in the world, like you're first one in the world needing them. It's not like they're paying for this, you know, for so many people. So I'm interested to hear, like, did the manufacturer eventually give them to you, or did the insurance company finally pony up?
So the insurance said yes the first time.
Okay.
And that's why I got them the first time, but I fought for them because I was.
Yeah, that's the thing though. You have to fight for it.
Yeah.
So they first denied it.
Yep.
And then you submitted more medical justification in that says that you really need these because your doctor said it in the beginning.
Yes.
Which is also a piece of legislation that I would love to get passed, is that if your doctor, you know, writes in the medical justification that you need something, then why is that even challenged? I mean, I know there's medical directors at health plans, but they're not the ones seeing the patient. So to me, anyway, I won't get on my soapbox about that, but I'm so glad you did get them paid for. And how much are they? So let's talk about that.
You know, it really depends on, people ask me that all the time, and it depends on the level of your amputation, because I have a hand, I have wrist rotators because I'm short, and I have wrist flexion units. Some people that are long, they can't have nothing but a hand. Some people only have partial hands. So there's a lot that goes into what you have, and I have everything you can have. You know, the best batteries you can have, and so
you have to charge them up.
I do every night. Yep.
Put them on the charger, just like
Yep.
on your phone.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
But I'd say they're, $150,000 a piece.
Okay. But see, this is what I always say, because I know that, prosthetic legs, same sort of thing, but it's like, how much would you pay? That's what I want to ask somebody at a health plan. Like, how much would you pay for your arms?
Yeah.
How much would you pay for your legs? Just because I advocate for people in complex wheelchairs all the time, it's like, really, well, how much are your legs worth? Because they would make comments like, well, we don't really want to pay for people to go outside.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's not medically necessary. Like, really? It's not medically necessary to go outside. So you want to sit in your home all day and not be able to move?
Do nothing.
Yeah. It's crazy to me that this is even happening in America. But anyway, go ahead. So you got your arms.
Yeah. And then, RoboCop, Peter Weller called me and he told them basically what I'd said about, they want their names mentioned in Hawaii 5-0. So I got my second set and became the first for that, which I did not have to pay for. And then.
Now, why do you need 2 sets?
They just newer things came out.
Okay.
So it went from plastic to like metal fingers and a little faster. And, just technology's gotten better and better.
Mm-hmm.
So then Touch Bionics found out about me and I started doing things with them, showing them how I use my prosthetics. And they found out that I'm one of the best users in the world. So I had that mechanical background. So I understand how things work and I can tell them what I like, what I don't like. So I end up being an ambassador for Touch Bionics. And then Touch Bionics was bought out by Oser. So I'm still an ambassador for Oser. And, but people kept on calling me because my name was getting out in the media. And then one time Peter Weller called me and he said, and this I'm trying to go around like back to the very beginning of who I am and how I've made it to where I am. So RoboCop calls me, or Peter Weller, and he said, I want to come to Owensboro. And I said, for what? And he said, because I want to surround myself with people you surround yourself with, because you're the most inspiring person I've ever met. And I want that in my life. So here I got RoboCop flying to Owensboro, Kentucky. And I asked him if we can have like a little party get together because people in my hometown hadn't met an actor. So he flies into Nashville. I pick him up. We go to Owensboro. I had this event called Handing Back, which I have some singer-songwriters come in and that kind of stuff. He comes in and I charge $10 per person to get in a meeting and listen to music. And it was $18,000. And I gave $18,000 to 7 different local charities in my hometown. I've done that twice. But before he got to my house, my son, Axel, was born. And I had this little toy box in the attic. And I was like, I'm going to go over and get this toy box, like these little cars, whatever I had when I was a kid. So I got up in the attic and I opened it up. And this is one of them God things. The first thing on top of it was a poster of RoboCop that I saved from the 80s. And
wow.
And it hits me like, why did I save this? Because the dude's coming to my house. And I asked Peter to sign it, and he signed it. And we still talk a lot, not every week, but he's got a house in Italy now. So when he's in Italy, I don't get to talk to him much, but we still, when he calls me and we hang up, if he does not tell me he loves me, he'll text me. Forgot to tell you I loved you. Like, we have a really close friendship. Same thing with McGarrett. So then, it just goes into other things like RoboCop. Well, Peter Weller got asked to do a TV show, and this producer was like, yeah, we're looking for some amputees to do something. He was like, I know somebody. So Peter Weller tells him, if you hire Jason, I'll do a show for you. And it wasn't even the same show. So I did a movie with Matthew McConaughey. And then
I did not know that.
Yeah. And it was called Free State of Jones is what it was called. So I was a wounded warrior and didn't have prosthetics on, all that kind of stuff.
So have you ever taken any kind of acting classes?
No.
You just went with it.
Yep.
That is so cool.
Because I didn't have a lot of speaking roles. It was just kind of like extras or whatever. But I had a cameo in Hawaii 5-0. And then that opened up. I did a commercial so I'm on my second hand. Then I get my third hand. This hand is the 5th generation hand. So every year or every time it's updated, it's something better. So the newest hand has an Apple app where I can change different grips and I can speed it up, slow it down with an app. So Apple found out about that. So I did a commercial on the Super Bowl for Apple in
Get
2014.
The
And-
Super Bowl commercial?
Yep. And then I ended up doing a MetLife commercial. 2 weeks ago, I did a commercial in Orlando, Florida at Disney, but I did it for Advent Health.
Mm-hmm. That is not to be confused with Advent Home Medical, my employer now.
Oh, yeah.
But
So,
it's a cool story.
Yeah. So I did that. And I've done, I've been on Dr. Gupta on CNN. I've been on Good Day Philadelphia. I've been on several hunting shows. I've been on several podcasts. Wrote my first book. So I think when you start from the beginning and you see the end or what has happened up until today, it's been all of it's been a God thing. I mean, it's just been a connection to being a good role model, being a good, I got a Hero of the Year award. I got Role Model of the Year award. And I think all those things, and I'm not bragging about myself, it's just, I think every positive thing, because if I was a negative person, I would have never had any of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And now with OSER, I get to go around. That's why I'm going to Chicago tonight, is to go around and show amputees how to use prosthetics. Anytime OSER needs somebody for upper limb, I'm their first phone call. That makes me feel really, really good that I'm their go-to person. And it's probably several things. I'm a great user, but more than that, I'm really easy to talk to. I'm a person that somebody can almost see and be like, that dude's pretty cool, and he don't care to talk. So they come up, and I'm not, all the cool things I've done does not make me any better than who I was before. Yeah, I've met celebrities. Me and you were talking about Mitch not long ago.
I was gonna say, I saw on your Facebook that one night you had a picture of you with Chris Jansen, and I was like, oh, you know what? And then I put a comment there. I'm like, you know what? I know who wrote a lot of Chris Jansen songs, you're like, who's that? And I said, well, Mitch Oglesby. And you're like, I know him. And I'm like, really? Like, this is such a small world.
Yeah.
But I had been trying to get Mitch on my podcast forever because I loved a couple of Chris Jansen songs. And I messaged him. I was like, I love this, song you wrote, Done. I think we wrote Done. I think that was one of them. But he was like, really? Redneck. Gosh, I'm losing it right now. But there's all these different songs. And he's like, really? That was your favorite song? I'm like, yes, I love it. I play it all the time. And then he wrote the Luke Bryan song.
Country On.
Yeah, Country On. Yep. That was really good. And I always message him, hey, when are you going to be on my podcast? And, he's like, yeah, I'll do it. And it's like, I think he's like, I'm out farming something or other, something usually when I catch him. And, but I think it's such a cool stories behind the songs. So anyway, I messaged that. You're like, yeah, I know him. And then you're sitting there saying how you just talked to him last week. And you told me to message him and just play with him and say, I'm thinking about having this Jason Koger dude on my podcast. What do you think? And I did it, but I think he thought I was crazy.
He's just real quiet.
But he did agree to the podcast now.
Yeah.
So he said, we'll make it happen. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. He's really shy. He really
is he
quiet.
Really shy?
He is. I think. Okay. I mean.
Well, he was just on the Grand Ole Opry too, singing the songs like last week or so.
Yeah. He sings and gets off.
Is that it? Is that right?
Yeah. Like I want to sing my song and I want to leave and talk to people or whatever. I mean, he's not a showboat, I guess,
Well, that's why I love a lot of these songwriters because they really, no one knows who they are. And they, write these songs and then Carrie Underwood and Luke Bryan sing them and they make the millions and nobody knows that, hey, Mitch Oglesby wrote that song.
That's right.
Or Will Nance wrote that song, which She's Everything. That picture I have behind there is Will Nance that wrote that. And it was a Brad Paisley song. But I think it's a lot like you. Like you're very humble. You've had all these really cool experiences, but you also like you picked the phone up the other day, just called me like at 9:30 at night. And you're like, hey, Melissa, I know Mitch Oglesby. And then you're like, hey, I'm coming up to Kentucky or from Kentucky up to St. Louis. Let's make this happen. But I just love that about you, that you're just easy. You're right. You're easy to talk to and you're very inspiring. And I think what you're doing speaking is really great because you can help so many people that might be going through a difficult time and you've gone through that difficult time and you've overcome it. Yep. And you kept such a great attitude about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, it's great. So what made you write this book? And how difficult is it to write a book? Because I've thought about writing a book, but I always think like there's so many things that I'm not sure I want to tell the whole world yet. Or maybe I'll write it and then like tell them not to release it until I die or something.
I've had so many people wanting to read my stories because there's so many aspects of my story, like the Hawaii 5-0 and how I got to that, and things that happen on Hawaii 5-0, to meeting people, to like, there's so many things that people will always want to know. And everybody was like, man, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And there's a guy from my hometown that wrote a book for Nikki Hayden. Nikki Hayden was 2006 world champ motorcycle racer for MotoGP. And Nikki was my age and was very successful. And before he passed away in Italy on a bicycle accident. And before he passed away, it was, they wrote a book about his dad, or his dad's name was Earl. And Earl wrote a book of how, he raised three very successful motorcycle racers. He had three brothers, and he had actually two sisters too. And, he was just like a family of racing is what it was. And so anyway, the same guy, Danny May is his name. And he called me. He's like, dude, we need to write a book. And I was like, all right, but I can't write a book. So he was actually the ghostwriter for me. So he kind of interviewed me, and he got the stories from my mom, my dad, my sister, Dr. Guy. We went to Dr. Guy's office. And that was the first time I sat down with Dr. Guy and realized of how it impacted him as well. I mean, there was multiple times that he just broke down crying. I was like, I need to take a break. And he told me, he's like, I will never tell this story again, so get it written down. You know what I mean? Like, he was very touched by it. And then my wife's side of it. And inside that book, there's Peter Weller wrote in there, RoboCop, and Alex O'Loughlin, just like what it was like to be with me or work with me. So there's a lot of different parts in that book of other people and what they seen. I learned a lot whenever I wrote the book, actually. And I tell people at the very end of that book, it says to be continued, because I don't know what else is going to happen, because every single door that ever opens up for me, I usually go through it and figure out, let's do it. Like, let's go. And I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of my life. So, that book is up, and, I guess it's kind of current, but there's going to be a lot more stuff. There's going to be a lot more people to know my story. Maybe they don't know my name, but there's going to be a lot more people to know my story. And if my story or that book helps one person, that's all I care about. It wasn't about making money on it. It wasn't about anything else. It's just a way to encourage other people to live life. And it's called Handed a Greater Purpose, because I feel like God has definitely handed me a greater purpose in my life.
It's great. I love it. And, for me, my one goal was just to, even starting this podcast, was really just to bring visibility for people with disabilities. And that's why I called it, See the Unseen podcast, because, a lot of people don't hear about these kind of stories. And I think it is so inspiring, and I'm sure you're going to do some crazy things. I have no idea what's to come, but like you said, you just never know that you might meet this person that connects you to another person. And who knows? I mean, who knows what show we're going to see you on.
That's right. That's right.
No, I think you were also on the, what is this, Ramsey?
Dave Ramsey.
Were you on Dave Ramsey?
I was. I
went
to his
Here's
office.
A picture.
That was at his office. All his employees, every Wednesday, Dave Ramsey personally invites somebody to come speak to his employees. He will not pay anybody. He wants to inspire all his employees. So it's a pretty big stage. It's, to be in front of Dave Ramsey, it's a big deal. I live right outside of Nashville anyway, so I was able to go down and speak. And that opened up doors to do some podcasts I've done. I did a Marcus Luttrell podcast, which Lone Survivor, the movie, is written about Marcus Luttrell. So I've been on his podcast because of Ramsey. I just did a podcast out of Ohio because of Ramsey. And then, the podcast in Ohio has spread more things. So, I mean, it still just keeps on. It's just a ripple effect.
It's great. How do you want people to remember you? What's the most important thing that you want people to remember?
I just want to remember that, to have faith is everything, and that no matter what you go through, you can get through it. It's definitely not easy, and we weren't promised that it was going to be easy at all. And I just, some people say that God will give you the strength to get through anything, and I definitely think He will give you the strength. But I don't think it just comes natural. I don't think that He just says, hey, Jason, you're going to go through this accident. Here's the strength to get through it. He wants us to rely on Him, to lean on Him. And then whenever you do lean on Him, that's when He does give you the strength to get through it. I don't think it's automatic. And I think that's where people automatically think that if they have faith, that everything's going to be okay and everything's going to go perfect. And they don't understand that it takes a mindset of leaning against Him or asking for His help, because if you don't ever ask, you're never going to get it.
Right. You have to really pray about it.
Yep.
And ask and you will receive, right?
Yep.
But it's like people think that just because, you ask God and that He's going to make it easy, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned along the way. Because I always say, oh yeah, I'll pray for patience, but don't make me really have to be patient, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
and I just want, if my story will help anybody, that's all that I need. I want to one day, whenever I do die, I want people to say, man, he was a good person, good dude, Christian, good dad, good husband, good. Like, I don't want anything negative said about me. So I'm a very positive person. And just like that TikTok I seen today is, the negative stuff that ever comes in my life, I'm just going to kind of pull it out and replace it with something better, stronger or whatever. And talking about RoboCop, it really hit me that I could inspire somebody that could call anybody in the world he wanted to, right? He could call, Taylor Swift, whoever he wants to call. I'm sure he can get phone numbers and call them. And instead, he called an old country boy in Kentucky and said that he had to surround himself with people I surround myself with. And I think about that all the time, is like how strong our stories can be for everybody. And I think people get wrapped up in fame, and it's like, so-and-so will never know who I am. Well, I beg to differ, because like when you show them your hard work, your dedication, your faith, your overcoming, your inspiration, whatever, you can open doors, and everybody needs everybody. There's nobody that's above anybody in this world. That's what I want people to know, that there's nobody any better than anybody else in this world. We all put our pants on the same way. I do mine a little bit different now, but
yeah.
But you got to stay positive. You just got to show people that doesn't matter who you are, how much money you got, you can't take it with you.
That's right. Everybody needs everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I do think that, because sometimes, you kind of wonder, or at least I do, is like, should I keep doing this? Should I, should I tell my story? Who cares? Like, I'm not a celebrity either, but if it does help one person, or if, me having this podcast somehow, and, it might be a real, maybe no one's going to listen to 2 hours of a recording. Some do, some don't. But if there's a little clip that gets sent out into, social media, and it helps somebody, or somebody, a health plan hears about it and they say, why are these people having to fight for an arm, and it helps somebody, then it's worth it.
Absolutely.
To me. So I think what you're doing is amazing. I think you're an awesome guy. And I'm privileged that you're here today, that you drove all the way here just to be in person with me. And if there is anything that I can ever do for you, I want you to always reach out to me too.
Absolutely. And I think it's really amazing that my story was one of those stories that inspired you to do a podcast. Like, that's awesome to know. And especially not knowing you in person, that my story reached out to you, that's reaching out to more people. Even if it's not about me, it's still, it comes around of reasons things happen.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
That's your next book, probably.
I don't know. It takes a lot to write a book. I don't know if I got patience.
Well, I want your ghostwriter name because I always say I don't want to sit there and type and tell it all. I just want to tell somebody else and let them write it.
Yeah, I can definitely hook you up.
Yeah. Well, Jason, is there anything else that we need to cover before we end the podcast? Did we hit on everything?
I think so. I mean, if somebody wants to look me up, I would love for people to follow me. I'm on Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever's out there.
You're on everything. I'm on YouTube, and, Spotify. Yeah.
And I think it would really impress people that if they try to get a hold of me, I'm very easy to get a hold of. I have a website. It's just jasonkoger.com. You can buy my book on my website. If you email me off the website, it goes straight to me. So if somebody wants to email me and buy a book like straight from me, not off my website, but like literally from my house, they can Venmo me and I can sign it, send it. I'm very personal. If somebody wants me to come speak, email me off my website. I'll definitely get back with you, or shoot me an inbox in social media, whatever.
That's great. All right. So you're available for speaking, and he's got this book. It's called Handed a Greater Purpose. Thank you so much, Jason, for being on this podcast. I loved having you on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to the listeners. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to my YouTube page, See the Unseed Podcast. Thank you.